Hey, my name is Mark. In this video I want to break down how to make epoxy resin coasters, so it hopefully will be your next DIY project. I like to make my coasters half wood and half epoxy, and I have this pile of wood from some other stuff that I made. So I just need to find a piece that fit into my mold. Hopefully the coasters should turn out about 10 by 10, and my mold is about 55 centimeters long and 11 centimeters in depth. But I made the mold a little too big, so I have some space to work with in case something goes wrong. Most of my wood is about 2.5 to 2.6 centimeters in thickness, and I want my coaster to be about 10 millimeter or 1 centimeter in thickness. So I simply just run it through the planer so I don't have to waste too much epoxy. It would be a little stupid and a waste of material if I make it 2.5 centimeter in thickness and then plane it down to 10 millimeter when it's cured. It took me about 10 minutes to plane it down. My thickness planer can take about 14 millimeter in each step, and I break the step down into 4, so it's not that hard to my knives. This is hardwood, so it can be hard for the knives. And while we are enjoying this loop of me winning, feel free to hit the subscribe button. I only have 1.3% of all my watch time coming from subscribers, so I hope I can get you on board too, so maybe I can improve that a little. You can use any type of wood that you want. I did go with some oak, and most of the stuff that I make comes from oak. You might also think about the mold I showed you in the start. It's a mold that I made myself, and if you want me to make a video on how to make these molds, leave me a comment below and I will look into it. The thickness planer is just a cheap one from the local hardware store. And if you don't have access to a thickness planer, you can split the wood with a bandsaw, but it might be a little more difficult to do it that way. Well, after some few turns I get the wood into about 12 millimeters, so I have some extra that I can cut off when it's fully cured. The slab I found here was a little too big, so I'll have to cut some off it. Since epoxy is way more expensive compared to wood, then you want to make sure it fits perfectly into your mold so you don't have any waste of epoxy. I simply just mark it and then go to my table saw and cut it off, but if you don't have a table saw, you can use any type of saw. And remember guys, always safety first. Don't put your fingers in there unless you have one from SawStop. I don't have, I have one from Ryobi, and I'm very pleased and happy with it, but remember, safety first, don't put your fingers there. So before pouring epoxy into the mold, you want to clean up some leftovers from the bark. You want to have a nice solid ground the epoxy can bind to, and you will see later in this movie what happens if you don't have cleaned it well. I know some of you will say it's not necessary, but you will see later in this movie what happened. And before you get ready to pour, you want to make sure that your mold is completely clean. So I always vacuum my molds, so that way I'm quite sure that I don't get any dust or whatever in my epoxy. Even sometimes I wipe them down with some baby tissues. So I always clamp the wood down to the bottom of the mold. You know, the epoxy is so strong that it can force its way under the wood and push the wood up, and you definitely don't want that. So I have some leftovers from when I was making this mold. It's just some plastic, some HDPE plastic that I'm using, and then some clamps. So I'm sure the wood will stay at the bottom of the mold all the time. I know the mold is not level at this point, but we'll fix that later, just wait and see. And now we come to the part where most people are struggling to get it right. Well, I simply just go for length, multiply width, multiply height, and then that number is divided by 1000, so I get it in cubic centimeters. And I know that 1g is equal to 1 cubic centimeters. So in this case, I will need 264 grams of mixed epoxy. The mix ratio for my epoxy is 2:1, so I'll need 176 gram of component A and 88 gram of component B. As you might see now, I mixed almost 1000 G or 1 kilogram, but my weight broke down while I was measuring, so it showed me some wrong numbers, and I was like sleeping while I was mixing, so that went bad. Well, I have some leftovers, and I always have a plan B for leftovers, but at this time I also need a plan C, which I didn't have at the time, so that was not so good. Well, I'm using some pigments from Black Diamond Pigments. I can definitely recommend try them out if you haven't already. I really like them, and that's my honest opinion. I'm not sponsored in any way to say that to you. Yeah, that is lots of epoxy for this little project. Well, I have this bench where I can place my mold on, so it gets leveled out. And I'm quite sure you at this point have found a way to level your mold out too. Just remember that epoxy is like water, so you have to be sure it's level. And as always, I will put a link in the description for any parts that I have used in this video. So now it's just the hard part, the long part. We'll have to wait until it's cured, and in my case it's 72 hours in the right conditions. You want to make sure you get rid of any air bubbles. You can use a gas burner or a heat gun for that, and then it's time to swirl it. I'll normally come back after some few hours and burn away some more air bubbles and sometimes make some more patterns, and I kinda babysit my epoxy. So this type of epoxy have to cure for 3 days, and then I can demold it. But you'll have to keep in mind that it's not fully cured, so for the next 14 days it can still bend. So the surface is staying on, it has to be flat, but you can work with it now. It's hard enough that you can to work with it now. So I just flip my mold and give it some few knocks on the back of it with my hammer, and then it comes out. And now you will see what happens if you don't get that surface clean where the epoxy is going to bond to. At this point you're very happy, and then yeah, you just want to go to bed without getting dinner, right? So again, make sure that you get all the leftovers from the bark away before you start pouring your epoxy. Well, I had another on my shelf that I can use for this video, and then I can glue up the other one and hope for the best. So now I run it through the planer to get rid of the 2mm. I want the thickness to be about 10mm, and this is really hard to the planer, so I try to take as little as possible at each turn. Time for sanding, and I start off with 120 grit, and make sure you don't force it or push it. If you do, you might get swirl marks, and then you'll have to go over it again, so just let the sander do the work. I do have another video where I show how to remove the marks. I put a link in the description. So I'll set the table saw for 10 centimeters, and I do double check this part because it's just so annoying to get this mistaken and end up with the wrong size. If you don't have a table saw, you can just use a hand saw to do this. Just keep in mind to use a fine tooth hand saw, or you might break the epoxy. So back to the sanding. I'm using 3M 120 grit sandpaper on my Boss sander, and this requires a little practice, but I'm kind of flipping it while I'm sanding. You can go with a flush bit and a handheld router, but I like this way. I kind of gently force it while I'm flipping it, and I think it comes out pretty awesome. You can also go with sharp corners if that's what you like, but make sure you get it well sanded. If you're still here, it might be because you like this video, and if you do so, then hit the like button so the video can spread to more people. And yeah, it also motivates me, so thanks. Next up, you want to give your new coasters a bath, and you want to do it so we can get the chips to stand, and then we can sand it down again. If you skip this step and you put a chilled cold beer on the coaster on a hot summer day, you will see the chips stand up then, so don't skip this part. Bath it, dry it, and let it dry for an hour or so before moving on. This is also a satisfying time because this is the first time you really see how they turned out. So now you have to choose whenever you like your coasters a little rough or if you want them silky smooth. If you want them rough, then you just sand it with 120 grit again to get rid of the chips. But if you want it silky smooth, change to grit 240 and give it a turn. And now it's time to give your new coaster some protection. I always go with Rubio Monocoat. They have a ton of color variations you can mix. The first I'm buffing in here is just pure. This is the regular one they have without any color added. But you will see in a moment when I'm adding some color and how that can turn out. Remember to wipe it down again and again so you get all this excess material off. You don't want it to leave some sort of a film or membrane on your coaster. So here I mix some color in the pure, and I have to say, this is a good way to make oak look like another sort of wood. And if you want the color to be stronger, just give it a layer more or add some more color. And that will be it for now. Thanks for watching, and while you're here, why not watch another video of mine?